There were many people on the right who were saying that Donald Trump needed to do more to end the riots. At one point, I was saying that as well. Many people said that Trump should invoke the Insurrection Act, send in the military, crush the riots. Well, he didn't. But the riots still stopped. And I believe it has to do with the fact that the feds stepped up, started arresting the organizers. The OSP, the Oregon State Police, got deputized. And all of a sudden, poof, the riots were gone. Now, many people on the left were saying that the riots are happening in Trump's America. It's his fault. Well, actually, it's the local mayors and the Democrats who run the jurisdictions where the riots were occurring. Naturally, many on the left tried to deflect, saying, well, that's just because Democrats run all the big cities. Well, I'm like, that doesn't change anything. The Democrats are still running the cities where the riots are happening. Well, now we're getting a slow trickle of very serious major news. It appears, according to several different publications, that the DOJ was seeking either sedition charges against many of these Antifa or Black Lives Matter far leftists, meaning they wanted to accuse them of conspiring to overthrow the U.S. But now the bigger breaking stories. First, Bill Barr apparently was exploring whether or not he could charge the mayor of Seattle. Feds were apparently doing research to see if there were criminal or civil rights charges against the Seattle mayor for allowing the Chaz chop to occur. And several people lost their lives. And now we have this story from the Associated Press. Department of Justice explored possibly charging Portland officials amid protests. Well, look, I like to see justice. This is still a bit disconcerting. I think Bill Barr has given some pushback saying that some of it's not true, like the charging Mayor Jenny Durkin. But it's still really scary because we are heading into an election. And you better believe both sides will pull out all the stops. Now, I got to say, I think the cheating for the most part comes from the Democrats. That's just the way it is. Mail-in voting is broken. We know it's broken, but they keep saying it's safe. And now they've apparently flagged Donald Trump's opinion on Twitter, linking people to mainstream news sources. It's an information battle. They're trying to silence his voice. I believe we're heading into a storm, as it were. And while it may seem good to many people that Democrats who are running these cities could face civil rights charges or criminal charges over their failure to secure their cities, think about what that means. Imagine feds walking into Seattle, arresting the mayor, or Portland, same thing. That would be a shocking moment for this country. And if you want to talk about civil unrest, you want to talk about civil war, this is exactly what needs to happen if that were going to be the case. Let's read the news and break down exactly what is going on so we can get very, very precise on what this news means. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate. If you would like to support my work, there are many ways you can give. I got a P.O. box if you want to send me some stuff. But the best thing you can do, seriously, share this video. I don't have a big marketing department or anything like that. I just rely on word of mouth. If you all right now just shared this video anywhere, then I would be doing way better than, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. If you think I deserve to, then with your simple sharing of the video, maybe I will. Also, don't forget to hit that like button, that subscribe button, and the notification bell. Let's read the story. Bay News 9 for the Associated Press reported through Bay News 9 says, Department of Justice explored possibly charging Portland officials amid protests. And this is just one of several stories I have to show you. The Justice Department explored whether it could pursue either criminal or civil rights charges against city officials in Portland, Oregon, after clashes erupted there night after night between law enforcement and demonstrators, a department spokesperson said Thursday. So this is official. The revelation that federal officials researched whether they could levy criminal or civil charges against the officials, exploring whether their rhetoric and actions may have helped spur the violence in Portland, underscores the larger Trump administration's effort to spotlight and crack down on protest-related violence. The majority of the mass police reform demonstrations nationwide have been peaceful. I love it. They still try to maintain that whole peaceful narrative. Majority of human beings are peaceful. Does that mean we ignore the murderers? If I complain about murder, does that mean I'm just exaggerating the problem? I love how they were like, many of these riots were confined to a certain area. Yes, yeah, that's true. And where I grew up in Chicago, a lot of the crime was confined to certain areas as well. We called it gang territory. Yeah, you get the point. I get it. Mostly peaceful, fine. But we're talking about the violent unrest for months that caused over $2 billion in damage, according to Axios research. And the Foundation for I believe it's called the Foundation for Economic Education, says it's actually higher than that. The $2 billion price tag, that just refers to insurance claims. What about the things that couldn't be claimed? The damage and destruction that went well beyond what they could actually claim. Let's read more. For many nights, federal officials were told that Portland police officers were explicitly told not to respond to the federal courthouse as hundreds of demonstrators gathered outside, some throwing bricks, rocks, and other projectiles at officers, and not to assist federal officers who were sent to try and quell the unrest. The department had done research on whether it could pursue the charges. Spokesperson Carrie Kupek said she declined to comment on the status or whether charges would be brought, meaning they still might bring charges. Kind of a scary thought. But if charges are warranted, then charges should be brought. If someone broke the law or exacerbated the problem or allowed this to happen for some kind of political gain, then yes, they must be charged. The federal government needs to weed out corruption. But it could be dangerous. At a time when we're hyperpolarized, I can only say this. Law and order must be upheld. Police need to be able to make arrests. The government needs to be able to enforce laws. If there are other people who are resisting and rejecting our laws, well, then we have a problem. Maybe the night is always darkest before the dawn, huh? And if they come in and arrest these people, these Portland officials, it could get bad. But maybe we have no other choice. Let's read more. They say bringing criminal civil rights charges against city officials to protest-related violence would likely present an uphill court battle for federal prosecutors. Justice Department officials disputed news reports that Attorney General William Barr told prosecutors in the department's Civil Rights Division to explore whether they could bring charges against Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan for allowing some residents to establish a protest zone this summer. President Donald Trump has blamed Democrats and specifically pointed to Portland's mayor, Ted Wheeler, who he says have not done enough to stop nights of looting and unrest in cities across the U.S. Trump has called Wheeler a wacky, radical left, do-nothing Democrat mayor. Well, to put it mildly, I guess. And as said, the city will never recover with a fool for a mayor. Trump has heaped blame for the unrest on Democrats who are leading the cities where violence has occurred and tried to keep focus squarely on pockets of protest-related violence instead of on the point of police reform and the larger movement of racial injustice. More than 100 people have been arrested in Portland on federal charges related to the unrest in the last few months. The FBI has said it was also shifting the agency's resources to focus more heavily on violence and federal crimes committed during nearly 3 months of unrest during nightly racial injustice protests in the city that often end in vandalism, clashes with police, and dozens of arrests. Well, they say the Justice Department is disputing reports that Bill Barr was going after Mayor Durkan. But we do have this story from Como News. It goes a little bit more in depth. And I don't know what to believe. I mean, what's the intent on reporting a story? I know that the media often falsely frames things, but if they've got a person, a spokesperson, or a source saying that they were going to do this, why wouldn't I believe it? Apparently, the spokesperson said they were going after Portland politicians. Why not Seattle? Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. Now, before I read this, I'll just point out Donald Trump has ended the riots in Portland. So we can talk about what they should have done or what they shouldn't have done. Is it acceptable for us to just say Trump was able to get it done by deputizing the Oregon State Police and then having the feds come in and make the arrest of the organizers? And then just like magic, the riots are gone. It was effective. Maybe that proves, in fact, or it provides evidence to suggest that the politicians in Oregon weren't doing anything to stop this. And I think the main issue is the DA. The DA was letting everyone go. But let's see what's going on with this Mayor Jenny Durkan. We'll come back to that in a second. From Como News, Attorney General explored possible criminal charges against Durkan for allowing CHOP, or Chaz, as some call it. They say, according to the New York Times, Attorney General William Barr told federal prosecutors to consider sedition charges against rioters, and he asked the Justice Department to explore possible criminal charges against Mayor Jenny Durkan for allowing the Capitol Hill Organized Protest Zone, or CHOP, to form. Whether this leads to legal action is unclear. But Barr reportedly singled out Durkan as responsible for the violence that unfolded in a zone where police steered clear. Professor Andy Siegel, a constitutional law expert at Seattle University, calls it ludicrous. Quote, they are saying the mayor may have violated criminal statutes, very serious criminal statutes, simply based on the discretionary decisions she made, like where to deploy the police, when to pull them back, Siegel said. Barr also wants rioters charged with sedition, which is the crime of trying to overthrow the government. It is a statute that Siegel calls archaic. Basically, it is a junior varsity treason charge, Siegel said. We have charges for rioting. We have charges for assault. We have charges for particular terroristic acts. And in the modern world, we tend to use those. But I'm going to push back on constitutional law expert Andy Siegel when he said that they're very serious criminal statutes based on the mayor's discretionary decisions, like where to deploy the police. She allowed the Chaz Chop to exist, and people died. Did she bring the police in then to end the unrest? No. Do you know when she brought the police in? Shortly after the protesters showed up to her house. Only then was she like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You see, allowing people to occupy a city center for which the city is now being sued, allowing them to inhibit and shut down businesses, run illegal checkpoints, and actually kill people, that was all fine, apparently. That was all okay. But heaven forbid these people go to her home. No. Then she put down the iron fist. So maybe there are charges to be brought. Maybe it's actually something that she could have dealt with a long time ago and people died because of this. You know, right now, there's a rumor circulating across the Pacific Northwest that Antifa is lurking in the brush, starting wildfires. I think it's untrue. I don't believe it. There was one guy who was a Black Lives Matter protester. That's confirmed. But it's just sometimes people do dumb things and we don't have any evidence of widespread Antifa activity. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying I don't believe it. Give me the evidence first. But from this, we have seen many individuals forming checkpoints. And the police have said it's illegal. You can't do that. Yeah? Well, setting up checkpoints at the Chaz was illegal too. The only difference between these random people who live in their neighborhoods and what happened in Seattle is that the mayor did not send in the police to clear it out. In Portland, it's just random people in different areas where they live guarding their neighborhoods. It's very, very different from a centralized, organized occupation that was resulting in death and disruption that the mayor ignored until she was personally threatened. So should she get charges? Don't ask me. I'm not actually the legal expert. Well, Durkin has issued a statement saying, today's report is chilling and the latest abuse of power from the Trump administration. I'm going to stop you right there, Jenny. What abuse of power? You weren't charged. It's just a news story. We don't know what happened. She says, as a former U.S. attorney, I took an oath of office to protect the Constitution and the rule of law. That is the bedrock of our country and why the Department of Justice cannot become a political weapon operated at the behest of the president to target those who have spoken out against this administration's actions. This is an act of tyranny, not of democracy. Ultimately, this is not a story about me. It is about how this president and his attorney general are willing to subvert the law and use the Department of Justice for political purposes. It is particularly egregious to try to use the civil rights laws to investigate, intimidate, or deter those that are fighting for civil rights in our country. Oh, spare me. Wow, is that brazen? People are dead in your city on your watch, and you let it happen. While Donald Trump and Bill Barr did everything they could to stop it. And if they were able to, then these people who were killed in the Chaz would be alive today. That's your fault. But they blame Trump, and I am sick of it. The buck stops with you. The president doesn't control your city's jurisdiction. You do. Stop passing the blame. Now, again, whether or not she should actually be charged, another question. And the DOJ is pushing back on this. So could it be that the story is incorrect and the Democrats are just using this to make Trump look like a despot? Maybe. I have no idea. All we really know is the story that's being reported. Here's what's being said. She says, quote, not surprisingly, just weeks before an election, this is yet another effort by the president and his administration to distract from the abject failure to lead America through its toughest challenges. He downplayed the threat of COVID-19, which has cost nearly 200,000 Americans' lives. He has done nothing to help millions of Americans facing an economic crisis, and he has threatened to withhold funding from Seattle and other American cities because of their commitment to racial justice. He also rolled back common sense climate protections that undoubtedly have played a part in the climate fire crisis that we are currently experiencing. Man, I really hate politics, can I tell you? They're saying that the fires are climate change, yet numerous reports come out over and over again about arsonists. I'm not saying the arsonists have started all the fires. I'm not saying they've started most of the fires, but there are arsonists. It is much more than just your climate crisis to be discussed. But what we're getting from this, and this goes for Trump as well. Trump and the Republicans and Bill Barr, as well as the Democrats, are hyping up with the problems they want taken care of. And I hate politics. You know, the Trump campaign puts out the, if Biden gets elected, this will happen. And it's like, I happen to agree. I do. Look, right now we're seeing the DOJ might actually go after the Democrats who allowed all this stuff to happen. Maybe they won't. Maybe they shouldn't. I don't know. But they're doing something. They're doing something. I believe, based on the evidence I've put forth, that the FBI was able to shut down the Portland riots. Do you think Joe Biden would do the same? No way. A Biden administration DOJ would let them just do whatever they want, and no one could weed out the corruption. In fact, it's scarier than that, because I think the Republicans are basically ineffective. I mean, beyond that, they just don't do anything. Not a fan. But we have Donald Trump and we have Bill Barr, and they're the last two people holding back this tsunami of lawlessness. I know maybe it's a little bit exaggerated, but that's the way it feels. Because look, I know there's a lot of issues to talk about pertaining to procedural law, but I'm focused on the riots and the violence and what these politicians did and didn't do. She goes on to say that she will continue to fight for what she believes is right and will not be distracted by these threats. Late Wednesday night, U.S. Attorney Brian T. Moran released additional information, saying, quote, "Throughout this lengthy period of civil unrest, I have had multiple conversations with Department of Justice leadership. They have asked for information about protest activity devolving into violence, about federal interests implicated by the Capitol Hill organized protest, and about the cases filed in this district regarding federal crimes. At no time has anyone at the department communicated to me that Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan was, or should be the subject of a criminal investigation or should be charged with any federal crime related to the CHOP. As U.S. Attorney, I would be aware of such an investigation. My office continues to work collaboratively with state and local law enforcement, including the Seattle Police Department, to prosecute federal crimes such as arson, weapons violations, and the use of destructive devices. Those cases are traditionally an area of focus for federal law enforcement. The goal of my office is to strongly deter criminal acts that have no place alongside and only endanger those who choose to engage in constitutionally protected speech. Siegel doubts Durkan would ever be charged and sees Barr's request as a play for swing voters on behalf of Trump. I think it's mostly about the election, Siegel said. It's about how they are centering these protests in the election campaign and trying to make it seem like the U.S. is under attack. Trying to make it seem like the U.S. is under attack. Sure, it's an opinion, I guess. No, it's just unrest. We have a growing faction of weird far-left zealots, cultists who believe insane, racist things. It is a dogma. And they're in government. They are. It's a fact. And they are in the streets and they are protesting. And they are painting their messages in our streets in violation of the First Amendment. And I say that because they won't allow Trump supporters to put up similar messages. They have used the power of public office to enrich and strengthen themselves, to prop up their political slogan, Black Lives Matter. And others aren't allowed to do so. If Joe Biden gets elected, there will be nothing to go after this corruption. But I guess we could only wait and see how that plays out. And I don't think it's going to play out well. We will not prosecute. Left-wing prosecutors, many backed by Soros cash, implement soft on-crime policies across America. This has been a long time coming. The prosecutors that were being put in, it goes back to October 25th, 2018 from the New York Times. The New York Times tells the story of George Soros funding many new progressive district attorneys who wanted to release people. And he supported many people who today are in fact releasing people because they won. Now, listen, the New York Times is the one who brings up George Soros, right? I mean, they bring him up quite a bit. I don't really care for the argument about George Soros because there are many billionaires who fund many different politicians and practices. However, in this capacity, it's important to point out the New York Times is reporting that Soros-backed DAs were being elected, and many of these people will not prosecute the far left. They're not. And that's why we need Donald Trump and his DOJ to pick up the slack. I don't know if I believe they're actually going to go after Mayor Jenny Durkan. That could be fake news put out by the left or the right. I have no idea. Maybe Bill Barr said it and he's lying about it now because they want the protests and the riots to be center stage, like this Siegel person said. Or maybe the left put out the fake news so they could accuse Trump of being a fascist or a despot or a dictator. Maybe that's the case. I honestly don't know. It would seem like going after Portland officials was legit, though. And it's also true. I believe this has been confirmed. Barr told prosecutors to consider sedition charges for protest violence. They say protest violence. I say this. Violent insurrection. These far leftists are saying revolution, nothing less. They're not going around saying, just Black Lives Matter. They are. They're chanting that, too. But they're calling for the violent overthrow of the country. Whether or not we should actually call that sedition, I don't know. We are inching towards the razor's edge, to put it mildly. And now we have this from the Daily Mail. Donald Trump says the House might decide the election as he paints doomsday scenario of North Korea forging ballots, mass fraud, results off by 15%, and protests, which will be put down. That's kind of getting scary. You know what, man? Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong in the comments. Just say it. Say, Tim, you were wrong about everything that actually happened. I remember when I said they'll come to your house and when you defend it, they'll arrest you. Then they started doing that. I remember when I said the culture war split would reach the highest level of government. I wasn't making grand predictions, man. I'm not pulling up lottery numbers. We know that there was the Russiagate thing. We know that there's the Obamagate thing. We already have the fracture in our federal government. Now we're seeing street violence, and of course that will start to make its way up to the highest levels. I wasn't just predicting random nonsense. So here's what I see. If the DOJ does go after these Democrats, wow. I mean, that would be a historic day in this country when state level and city level politicians get arrested for civil rights or criminal charges due to the riots. Not only that, look at COVID. What if charges come from the unconstitutional and illegal acts, civil rights charges? What if they get charged in that capacity? Trump is predicting it could be bad. The Daily Mail reports President Donald Trump railed about mail-in voting, which he cast as vulnerable to foreign interference, and raised the prospect Wednesday that a contested presidential election could be thrown to the House. He has also vowed to squelch any violent protests on Election Day, warning they will be put down very quickly. The president exploded about mail-in voting at a White House press briefing after DailyMail.com asked him about his earlier vow to put down any potential violent election protests, which he said would amount to an insurrection. He then raised the prospect of an election so disputed that it ends up being decided not by the direct vote of the Electoral College, but by the House of Representatives. It's not just the counting of the ballots, which, by the way, will take forever. Trump fumed. It'll take forever. You think November 3rd? You might not have. I guess at a certain point, it goes to Congress. At a certain point, it goes to Congress. You know that. Well, according to one story I read from Newsweek, it's not going to go to the House. It's not going to go to the House for a direct vote. It's going to go to House delegations for which Republicans actually have the majority. So Trump would win in that capacity. I don't know exactly what we can expect, but we can see at the highest levels, they're talking about arresting Democrats. Maybe they're just talking. I don't know. Seems like they were researching it pretty seriously. The Democrats are disputing it. They're saying Trump's the one who's going to cheat. The Democrats are pushing mail-in voting, which is broken. And I'll leave you with this. Donald Trump tweeted a few things. Twitter then put a tag on them, linking you to mainstream media information. Trump just gave his opinion. Why is he not allowed to have an opinion? Why is Twitter and Facebook saying that if Donald Trump declares victory, they will remove his posts? Isn't that something else? I am really worried about what happens after November 3rd, and I hope all of you are paying attention. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at youtube.com/TimCastNews at 6 p.m. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all next time.